All right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm Connor, and I'm here as always with Calvin.
Hey.
And we're joined again by Katya.
Hello.
Glad to have you back on. And we're talking about We're All Going to the World's Fair today. This is a pretty small movie. We saw it at the Sea in downtown Denver, which I always love going to because they have really cheap beer, and almost no one is ever there. So it's a really kind of a cool viewing experience to head down there. And
Except for when we went to see this one.
Oh, yeah, there were like 4 people there instead of just us.
No, when We're All Going to the World's Fair, somebody rented out one of the theaters.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, for a documentary.
Theater. Yeah, our theater had almost no one in it.
Yeah, there was no one else watching. They forgot our movie didn't even start.
Yeah, they were, because I remember I walked out to the bar, I'd be like, because there was no staff around, just the bartender. I was like, hey, it's been 15 minutes since our showtime was supposed to start. She was like, oh my God, let me go find someone.
They were much more concerned about all of the people in fancy clothes, and
There's
they're
like
very
200 people.
Yeah,
That's a
there
lot
was.
of people.
I was like, oh my gosh, did we come on a premiere night for this? No, there was 7 people in our theater.
Calvin's like, are we gonna get tickets?
Yeah, were we one of the small, the few that knew about this amazing event, and everyone else is like, oh, we got to join in.
Right.
We were going to be a part of something. No, we were just in the way.
Essentially, yeah. So this was written and directed by Jane Schoenbrun. It had its release at the Sundance Film Festival, and then it got its theatrical release just recently, which is why we went and saw it. It's only an hour and 26 minutes, and I thought it was wasn't until it was like maybe a couple hours later or a day later, and I was like, man, this is like really grabbed me. It's a much more interesting story than I think meets the eye, and the trailer certainly doesn't help that. It's not what I expected, but it was still something I was really interested in.
When I was watching the movie, I was underwhelmed. But I think part of it was because the trailer it made me think it was going to be like this kind of old school horror film, like with things
I think
that scared you, and it wasn't scary in that sense.
I think the trailer would lead you to believe you're getting into like the first Paranormal Activity or like a Blair Witch Project.
Or like Host. Did any of you see Host?
I saw this movie compared to Host.
Yeah, it's basically they do a seance over Zoom.
Right.
And yeah, so no, there's just no lights because everyone's just using their laptop. Yeah. It's that same aesthetic, but that movie was stupid. Whereas this one is like, I love this movie because it reminded me so much of making my own student films with my terrible equipment. Like, okay, how do I make something interesting at all? And a lot of times it just comes down to good execution. Like if you want to understand where you can start as a filmmaker, this is such a great place because they use the natural sound recording from just a laptop. They maybe they used better equipment, but they certainly designed it to seem like this was lower budget stuff, including like as if they were using webcams off of the cameras. I'm almost sure that they weren't, but they were placed in ways that it would make you think that they are.
It looked like things were like recorded on cell phones too. Like, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of that. Mm-hmm. When the movie ended, I leaned over to you and I remember asking, I was like, this is what I think a really good student film looks like. Yeah. And that's not a knock against this film because I think you hear student film and you're like, oh, like crappy. I think of it more
like trying. I think the thing is like when we say student film, I think a lot of people think of like someone trying to imitate Hollywood and doing it poorly.
Right.
And to be fair, there are plenty of people that like the school I went to was heavy into experimental filmmaking, and there was one kid that was inspired to go to film school because of Michael Bay, and we would always just look at him like, what are you doing here?
Why?
We're working with cyanotype prints in a dark room. Like we did almost no digital After Effects or anything. Yeah. There was like one elective that you could have taken for that, but it was more like here are the basic understandings. Like here's basically how you record sound, what a lighting setup is, how cameras work. But we did a lot of work in film, which is very unusual for most modern film courses because now everything is so video intensive because it's such a great way to get into filmmaking. It's so cheap. You're just paying for, rather than money for the supplies, you're paying in time for editing, and you just have so much more stuff to look at.
Well, I think what's cool, like listening to some interviews from Jane, I think that's what she was going for, or they were going for. They wanted to do something on a low budget. They wanted to make it good, and they didn't want to compromise anything. So it's like the difference between being a kid and doing what you can with what you have and being like a professional that decides to say, I don't want to do anything different. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. So I'm doing this as cheaply as possible. And then everything can be my vision, and like I can put across the message I want. And then after that, if I make bigger movies, cool, but they're going to know who I am and what I'm about.
Right.
I'm not going to like take all their money and then do what they want and
make
figure it out.
compromises.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem that we have with the Northman.
Yeah.
Is you can see all of the compromises that were made.
That movie has like the look of a Robert Eggers movie, but like none of like the dialogue and narrative like flow that is like so important to his movies.
Yeah, there's none of the psychology.
Yeah.
There's none of the narrative. There's none of the substance that make his movies what they are. It's so sad to see.
It certainly looks good.
Yeah, let's throw $50 million more dollars at your budget, and you actually make a lesser product.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe it's a little more streamlined. The story makes a little bit more sense. You hit a wider audience and make a ton of money. But I don't know. I just feel like it's overall unengaging.
Yeah. And when I compared this movie to a student film, I meant it mostly in terms of budget. This movie looks and feels like a low budget movie, but like I said, it reminds me of like a really good low budget
Yeah.
movie. I mean, I like this movie, I won't say moves at like a snail's pace, but it certainly is not like electrifying. It's not Blumhouse horror or anything like that.
there's like a 12-minute shot.
Yeah.
That opening shot, it just grabbed me. I was like, throughout so many points in this film, like my jaw was just wide open.
It really was.
Yeah, you gave me such crap about that. After, like, I didn't think that was interesting at all, and you just
what happened?
Yeah, like you just couldn't. It looks like you couldn't breathe the whole movie. But I just think that because of this aesthetic, because of how when you make a movie look like this, make it look cheap, it's so easy to fall into the territory of it being hokey, of it being a lesser product, because your aesthetic was trying to be simple. So you don't have these things to make up for the fact that what you shot wasn't interesting or engaging or authentic. You don't have the editing, you don't have the music, you don't have this really expressionistic lighting. You just have a girl in a room with just like some lamps.
Yeah.
It's very naturalistic. It's very low quality. It's meant to look like an actual teenage girl's room, and that is hard. When you limit yourself like that from an aesthetic, it is hard to pull everything off and make it feel so real. So that's why I was just like, because I made films like that. I was like, wow. I mean, part of it is like me watching myself on the screen, like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else thinks this, but don't worry, I'll point it out before anybody else says anything.
All right. So before we move on any further, let's give like a little synopsis on what the film is about. It starts out with this girl, like we said, opens up with her in front of her laptop, and she's going to do the World's Fair Challenge, which I don't know if you guys are into like internet culture, like horror on the internet, or like creepypasta and stuff like that. There's all kinds of, it's its own like big community of people who like kind of reach out and connect and share these stories. And it's all like this very odd but very engaged group of people who kind of get into this, this kind of horror. And so she's going to go through this and then kind of document the changes she goes through her own like YouTube channel or some video platform. They didn't use YouTube because I'm assuming they couldn't license it. But it looks just
totally
like it.
YouTube.
Yeah.
It's definitely, yeah.
And then just throughout her kind of journey, posting these videos, someone else reaches out to her with their own video saying like, you're in trouble, like we need to talk. And they kind of build their own connection through it. And the movie is really cool in how it kind of keeps building up the kind of intensity of the videos she's posting. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a little twist at the end, which I don't really want to kind of save. But that's like essentially the story here. It's not horror. It's not jump scare horror, certainly. I really like how this movie paced it out. And I really like that this movie isn't like exposition heavy, and it just like lets you kind of sit in it and you're moving along with the character, which is, I think is a great part of how they use the cameras and everything. And like the equipment, like the laptops and the phones, all that stuff like plays a bigger role in this movie than I think you would realize after like just like taking the movie like looking at it as a what am I saying, a book with a book's cover? What is that phrase?
Judging a book by its cover.
Yeah, okay. Oh my goodness.
Wait, that's why we do a movie podcast.
This movie is nothing like a book cover.
Oh my goodness. I think it'd be really easy to just judge this movie just initially. You view it and then you're like, oh, okay, this just wasn't a good scary movie. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that tells like a pretty like robust story, I think.
Yeah, and you feel weird afterwards. You feel really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that the opening scene, which is really just the opening shot, which I want to say is at least 5 minutes, I think that really says everything you need to know about where your expectations should be as far as what kind of movie this is. I don't think that you can have a movie move that slow, a horror movie move that slow for a traditional audience. So that should be your first clue to tell you that this is not a traditional horror story. This is not geared for traditional horror fans. So if that's what you're expecting, unfortunately the trailer looks like it should be a little bit more.
Certainly. I thought that.
Yeah, I was expecting something like really like either violent or heady or just wildly psychological for the horror elements. And what I find so interesting about this is just how mundane everything really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely thought that that whole opening scene, just it's her and you just see her room behind her. I kept looking around in the background like, oh, something gonna move, something gonna fall.
Yeah.
Because that's like my dumb American horror brain.
Yeah.
That's like, there must be something scary happening in the background. I must be missing something. There's gonna be something hidden in every scene.
That would be so wild.
And
Or is
that's-
there a clue or
yeah.
whatever? Like I kept watching, like, oh, now we're on this side, now we're on that side. I'm like, oh well, it's probably just like the way she's moving her camera.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
but it
yeah.
seems to mean something.
But the movie essentially has none of that because this isn't a paranormal movie. It's not about like a conjuring spirits or anything like that. It ends up it's just a story. And so that's what I found really interesting about it. But yeah, like you said, unfortunately the trailer is cut together to make it look like something scary and sinister is taking place here, and it's really not.
Yeah.
But it really is.
But I'm pleasantly surprised that it's not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
I think it's much better than what I thought it was going to be, which is that doesn't seem to be the case for a lot of these. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, maybe that was with the Green Knight. The Green Knight ended up being a lot more heady than I was expecting, but the trailer made it seem like he was fighting giants. I still don't know what the giants mean.
Yeah, I have no idea. So I kind of want to move into some of the aesthetic then. You had been mentioning that before we gave our little synopsis. The music is all done by Alex G. He does this it's this really great like kind of acoustic song, kind of these ethereal voice in it, and it's just wonderful. He did all the music for it, and I told Calvin, I was like, I think you'd like this. It's weird, but I think you would like this band.
No, you the way you said it at first, it's like it's not bad.
Yeah, okay.
But I
It's
think
weird.
you like it.
Yeah, but I think you like it.
which wasn't meant to like be a diss or anything. You have a unique taste in music, and I listened to the song that's in like the opening credits for this movie like 4 times today. It's wonderful. But his genre is described as indie rock, bedroom pop, indie folk, and slacker rock. I have heard of one of those genres. So
I love slacker rock.
Yeah, that's funny.
my favorite is bedroom pop.
Yeah,
I
that
wonder
one
what
too,
that
I
is.
guess.
I just imagine everything seems to be like on YouTube, like music, like the lo-fi hip hop genre, which
Sure,
is just
yeah.
like that.
Do other things while listening to this music.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the new like white noise.
Yeah, it
Essentially,
is.
It's just something you throw on in the background.
It's a generational white noise.
yeah. But
We're
yeah,
gonna get hi-fi hip hop.
Yeah.
When our kids are born.
High five.
that's it. Yeah, I love the music in this. I thought it was great, and that it's all like original for this movie. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the use of the cameras, which we kind of touched on already. You have the laptop camera. She's used her phone. And then I think the other interesting thing is I think the movie essentially starts out with us as the observer. We're viewing Casey through her own like media or whatever, through her own laptop. Mm-hmm. And then later on in the film, we're like a subject in the room with her. We're watching her watch stuff on her YouTube, on her YouTube channel or on the laptop. And then there's a really great part. It's like 5 or 6 minutes where now we're just watching like YouTube videos about the World's Fair.
Yeah.
And I love how like the progression of that takes place for the viewer. It's like we start out as an observer, we become more involved with the story until eventually like we are now in the same position as Casey's in. And I love how that worked. I thought it was like really masterfully done. And if you got bored at this point and you're like, I'm just watching YouTube videos, this is dumb. It's like this great way to involve you in the story without a big exposition dump. It engages you as the viewer. You care about this kind of stuff and this research about the World's Fair as much as she does. And it's like, it's 5 minutes of watching YouTube videos and it could seem really dumb. But I think if you really paid attention to the story that's being built as a whole, it's like one of the most important parts of the whole movie to me.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think that it really simulates an actual rabbit hole that you can go down on YouTube and find. I mean,
Certainly.
there's just the algorithm is so dark the way it can completely change someone's mind. Or like I remember finding stuff on flat Earth and hollow Earth theory like back like late college, and I was like, I guess I suppose they could do the math for. I mean, they would have figured all of this out already. No, this is just so dumb. But the fact that it came up like, and I was looking for like anime. Like, why am I watching? Now I see why.
Yeah.
Like, those things seem to go hand in hand for some reason.
One of my guilty pleasures is to look up flat Earth channels and watch.
Oh, I love it.
It is like just fascinating to me. Like the mental gymnastics is like impressive on its own.
Yeah.
Like I truly think flat Earth channels on YouTube are like a gem because they're just so funny. Like,
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Kevin in Memphis because he refused to sell Diet Coke to anyone as a server and also believed flat Earth.
hey, well, good for that's good.
I mean, he had a
the
lot going
taking a
for him.
stance.
Yeah.
So any other soda he would sell, but like not Diet Coke.
Not Diet Coke.
Something
No, not Diet Coke. You could order that from someone else.
But if they just wanted a Coke, he'd be like, okay, I'll
Coke
give
is
you
fine.
that.
Coke is fine.
That's such a weird place to draw the line.
Yeah.
But I think that's such an interesting point that you make about the perspectives changing. I didn't notice that as much at first, but how we move the camera to change perspective about when we're an audience member of Casey, when we're watching Casey perform, when we're watching Casey put everything up before she performs, and when we are Casey, actually figuring out like why we got to this point in this way of thinking in the first place.
Right.
So I got a little caught between, like in that first shot, between feeling like a subscriber watching her and feeling like her webcam that she was watching. Like I've got stuck between feeling like, oh, I'm the subscriber watching, or I'm just her watching her own reflection.
Yeah, because I
Kind
think
of
she
thing.
did restart
She
her
restarted,
intro.
multiple times.
So that's a good point too. Is
Yeah.
like whether we were, which one were we at that point? Were we one of the audience members designing the design product in the end,
Yeah.
or were we still just a fly on the wall, like looking at the process?
Yeah, I think we could be either.
Yeah,
or
I think it works either way.
Because I think the whole point was to pull you into like caring about her emotionally, even though she wasn't really giving a lot. Like we don't really know anything about her.
Yeah,
I felt for her immediately.
Yeah.
I cared about her when she started pricking her finger. I was like cringing. I was like, oh my
Oh
God.
my gosh, yeah. I was like, wow, she just like I think once.
Yeah.
Probably one good one would probably
Yeah.
do like not 30. Oh my God.
I think I like
just
clenched my fist. I was like, please stop.
yeah, I think that was the most horrible part in the whole movie.
You're
actually.
right.
It
That's
was
the
like,
most violent. That's the
Her
that's the
stabbing her
graphic
finger with
scene
the
of the
pin.
film.
yeah. At first, partly because I thought it was a pop socket. I was like, okay, that's weird, or like a little medallion, like, oh, this is part of the World's Fair, and then she turned around and showed.
No, it's
the
like a pin that little emo
Yeah.
kids put on their
Yeah,
backpack.
and I was like, oh no, and then she just like went to town, and if that was real, like that is incredible acting, because she just did.
Yeah.
Although her left hand did dip below the outside of the camera, so it's more likely that she just probably.
Okay. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, she probably dipped it in something red, and that was where the blood came from. But
Well, can they make you stab yourself?
I mean, no.
What's his name? Wolf, the kid from Hereditary.
From Hereditary?
He
yeah.
wanted to break his nose for that
What?
film. Like,
Yeah. So there's a part where you've seen Hereditary, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
gets possessed in the classroom and slams his head in the desk.
Totally.
Yeah.
So he wants to actually break his nose.
He was telling Ari Aster, he's like, no, I want to break my actual
But he
nose.
could like kill himself.
Yeah,
Or, like
and
break
Ar-
his brain.
Yeah, Ari was like, no.
yeah. It ended up not.
Maybe
They put a pad down for him, but
Yeah.
some actors just want to like really do it.
He dislocated his jaw though.
That's
still.
true. Yeah.
Crap.
He
Yeah.
dedicated to his craft, that's for sure. He was in old, right, too? He probably was like trying to age himself quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like get on. But this girl, Anna Cobb, like watched some she was a totally different person in real life. It's like kind of one of those movies where you think because it's like this kind of documentary style movie, like found
Authentic.
footage, authentic movie, you're like, oh, all these people are just like kind of like they are in real life. All these people, meaning the two people and the one back of a person we see, they're like who they are in real life. But she was not that at all.
That's so
Like
strange.
watching like videos of her actual she's super bubbly and like charismatic.
That's so strange. For a while,
Right? Yeah.
I couldn't figure out halfway through the movie, I was like, there were certain points where her face looked like the girl from Stranger Things. And I was like, this can't be it. No,
No.
it's she doesn't have the right accent.
She did have kind of a strange accent sometimes too.
Yeah, it was
But
very interesting. But did she have that accent in any of her interviews?
Not really. I think it's more of like that, like the stolted. I don't, that kind of like
that preteen stutter.
Halted. Yeah, you're like thinking about everything. You're like swallowing your words, kind of accent. It's like not really an accent.
Yeah, you're just kind of mumbling because you're so unsure of yourself.
Yeah, and you're nervous.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I took some notes on Anna Cobb. I thought she was great. I think it's really impressive to see someone who essentially has zero interaction with any other character in the entire film. They have like conversations through Skype and they communicate through videos they make, but there's no interpersonal communication really between her and any other character. And I think it's impressive. Like, she's like 18 when they filmed this. So I think that's pretty cool to like come onto a stage and essentially just sit in front of a laptop and they're like, okay, go. And she pulls off like authentic, awkward, lonely teen, complete with cringy YouTube video channel. Like, I thought it was perfect. Everything about her character felt like really genuine, really real to me, which I think is like a big part of what made this movie work so well to me, is how real it all felt. Even though, and it's even like lent to that, the fact that there isn't really a supernatural or paranormal activity going on in it.
No.
So it lends more to the authenticity. It made her character feel more real to me. So yeah, I loved her in this. I would be excited to see her in more films. I think she was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess we're kind of moving into what this movie is really about then, you know? I think we've talked enough about what it isn't. What makes this movie so great?
So I wanted to start with like kind of some of the inspiration for this. When the film ended, I told Calvin, I was like, this reminds me a ton of this documentary I saw. It's called Beware the Slender Man. It's on HBO. And it talks about this like really tragic story, the stabbing that took place in Waukesha County in Wisconsin in 2014. Two girls kind of lure their friend out into the woods and they stab her because the Slender Man told them to. They think it'll please him. And if you're unaware of this is kind of a buildup of like creepypasta stuff, you know, like kind of internet horror, which again, I told you I'm like kind of into. But it was sort of started out as this character that was edited into like photos. It's a really tall man, faceless man with the suit on. And it started out just as like a Photoshop thing. And then eventually just the internet grabbed hold of it and started building all this lore around this character. And that to me felt a lot like what this movie was. Like the World's Fair was just kind of a thing that someone made up a story about, and then all of a sudden like YouTube gets a hold of it and teens are like brought in, and that this is kind of the culture that is really dominated by like teens, preteens. And so and those like people in like fringe groups. And I think that's exactly the character that Casey is someone who is not in an in-group. She's kind of a loner. It's portrayed really well how lonely she is, because like you don't even see her father in this. It's just like bits of his voice or like her leaving the room when she sees he's coming home. So this is a really isolated person. And so I thought that's what the story of this movie was, is it was talking about like these really isolated groups of people who will still innately need to have human interaction, and they'll go about it in an unconventional way through internet horror stories.
Yeah, and there's also another one that I read as inspiration. It's called The Whale Suicides. And then this one is a little bit more of an urban myth than it is a real thing, because it doesn't sound like anyone's ever actually found any evidence of it. But so the myth is that there are there's a pro-suicide forum where someone can go, and over 30 days, someone will guide them through the process of what it would that will ultimately kill themselves. Let's see. They have them do like crazy stunts each day for 30 days, and then they have them carve a whale into their forearm and then kill themselves.
I could see how that tracks with this movie really well, because it's not really her harming herself, it doesn't seem, but the video she's making leads you to believe that she's going to harm her father.
Does it?
Oh,
yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
I thought it did, but I also, well, we'll talk about that later. I initially thought it was her father, but I also think it's JLB, the guy that she's talking to.
Okay, yeah.
I think she's saying she's going to hurt him.
Okay.
So I have more to say on that later.
No, yeah, because I want to get theories towards the end, because I think this movie it's ambiguous enough, and it's not trying to hold the viewer's hand the whole time to where you can still come up with your own ideas on it, for sure. Like I have some theories on JLB for sure.
Yeah, and I listened. So whale. But I found that so weird that she actually like put blood on the screen, which initially like led me like, oh, this is lore, this is myth. Like this screen is not like gonna absorb your blood or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a touch screen.
No, it can't be.
Right.
But like listening to Jane talk about some things, it sounded like creepypasta was like her thing or their thing. That was where they found like it's always so interesting to hear that people listen to horror or like read horror to like calm down. Like it's their happy place kind of.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's what metal is for me.
Yeah. That's always so strange for me as like someone who likes sunshine and rainbows and like acoustic guitar.
I like black rainbows.
And black rainbows. But like a big part of this movie was like what does it mean to be yourself in this world where yourself doesn't make sense to you? Like what is she actually doing in real life? She's walking around this wasteland that we get to see in the credits, like of closed down Toys R Us and like
I love that shot.
Zone.
That was my favorite.
Yeah.
Having the Toys R Us pop up at the beginning. I was like, oh, that's perfect.
That's like what her town is.
Yeah.
It's just like this modern America industrial ghost town.
Yeah, my favorite part was when she was look where we are today, guys, and she was just standing on the side of the street, and then she like panned over, she like zoomed in across the street, like AutoZone.
Dude, I get that
great.
jingle stuck in my head all the time. Like, get in the zone, AutoZone.
Yeah, that was like the biggest reason why I went ad free, because I couldn't stand those jingles anymore.
I love them. So yeah, like how do you be yourself and like where do you be yourself? Is it online? Is it in real life? Is the person you're online real? Like is what she's doing real or is it her performing?
Right.
Where is she performing? What does she want to be? And like who is she and does she know and does she care and how aware is she of what she's doing?
Yeah.
Like physically and mentally and emotionally.
And I think it's really interesting what this movie brings up, the idea of who you are in an online space and whether that's the same thing as who you are in real life. Because in a lot of ways you could say it's just an extension of yourself, but it exists in such a small vacuum that even though it might be yourself, it's such a weird way of people seeing you that way that it exists separately, which is, I mean, that's a really hard concept. I think this is one thing that this movie does so well for me is it actually explores the idea of the internet, of how people deal with technology. I mean, because every movie is just like, iPhones, bad, social media, gross.
Yeah.
And then like, what does that actually mean to the average human? Mm-hmm. It doesn't like, you're talking about like, most of those movies are just like old boomer 60-year-olds or even like Gen X's like 50-year-olds like, everyone's got their face glued to their phones. Like, okay, but like there are so many different ways that you can engage with the internet and you can engage with technology. And I think this is what's so great is it feels like there's going to be like there are dark intentions of the internet on the internet, and some people are just using them to get by, like just because they're so lonely, so isolated, and so sad.
Yeah, we should bring up JLB, who's really the other character in this movie. I was not expecting there to be kind of a perspective shift in this film. I thought it was going to follow Casey the whole time. That's sort of how the trailer set it up to be. And I love the crossover. They're both on like the Skype conversation, and the camera starts on Casey's computer, and then it changes to JLB's, and then it like pans out, and now you're in his perspective. Were you guys expecting it to be like a young man? I was thinking like someone in their 20s or something like that. It's like an old guy, like an older guy.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed because of the
sketch and the voice.
Yeah, just mostly because of the sketch. It felt very creepypasta, which feels generational, which I would not imagine someone who's in their late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, his voice had like a falsetto quality to it where I just thought he was going to be a younger man.
Well, it was also modulated.
Was it?
No, I don't think so. I think it was his anxiety.
Yeah.
You're right.
He was
no.
talking like he was very nervous all the time. But also, I listened to a podcast and something about it, or they kind of insinuated that his avatar was a creepypasta thing.
Yeah,
or like
I would
basically the same, like very similar to a creepypasta meme.
Yeah, that's the way I interpreted it.
Yeah, which I thought was like, I don't know. Initially, I think if I'd seen this movie a couple years ago, I would have felt like, oh, that's weird that he doesn't have his video on and she does. Like, I would have felt so weird by that. But at this point, I've had so many meetings and calls where someone else hasn't turned their video on that I just think
That's
it's
such a
normal.
good point.
Like, I'm just like, that doesn't really bother me because, like, I've had interviews with people who haven't turned their
Yeah.
flipping videos on.
You told me about that.
Yeah, like I'm just like, why did you ask me to video call you if you were just gonna talk?
Just have a
like,
phone
just
call.
call me. That's so much easier. Now I feel like I have to be on the video.
Yeah, and at what
Be
point?
display.
Yeah, at what point do you're like, do I turn my video off?
Yeah, because I'm gonna go get a soda or go to the bathroom
Well, I mean, like especially if they don't
or
have.
just in general.
Yeah, if no one else has their video, you're just the only one in that meeting. Like,
Yeah,
with
it
your
is.
video on, like.
So weird.
Is it a faux pas of me to close it now? Or
Exactly.
just go voice only.
You feel like it is. It's like taking your pants off in public once you already realize everyone else like has their pants off. But can you take yours off?
It's just like that.
But yeah, I thought it was I still don't really understand why it switched to JLB's perspective. Like it's interesting that we got to see anything of him in his life at all, I think.
I think when you kind of see how the movie ends and you find out more stuff about Casey, it makes his involvement, like Calvin was talking about, like how do we interact with the internet? What do we use it for? Are we putting a persona forward? Are we being our true selves? I think JLB is like, that's who he actually is. We'll get into theories. I think something really traumatic happened to him and he thinks this stuff is real. And so he cares for Casey genuinely, and he cares about what happens to people who get involved with the World's Fair. And I think he's genuine, and his way he interacts with the internet and this community is to do research and warn people and like be a shoulder for them to lean on. So I actually think like the way he interacts with it is totally different than the way Casey is interacting with it. And that's why I think kind of the changing perspectives and giving an idea on how he's struggling with the World's Fair and the way Casey's struggling with the World's Fair are actually totally different. So I liked the introduction of that character and taking time away from Casey to show what he's going through.
I don't really, yeah. It's just like, who does he decide to care about, like in the World's Fair? And if he really cares about the game, like what is he actually doing in real life? What content is he putting out to play the game? Is that his role in playing the game? Just to warn people?
So I don't think he's done the ritual. He just sees other people post videos and he's like, and then he reaches out to them.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
To kind of be a person there for them.
If we want to get into it right now, we can, I suppose.
Yeah. I say let's get into some of our.
Because I think you and I,
Yeah.
like especially when we walked out of the theater, we had the same thoughts. You know, we haven't actually said this yet, but I mean, you can go ahead. You're the one that's been teasing this.
Yes. So this my main theory is that I think JLB has a child, a son or a daughter, who participated in the World's Fair, and they they committed suicide or they committed some kind of violent act, something that got them incarcerated, something like that. And this man has like lost his family as a result of that, because we see JLB in a room with a computer that looks like a child's room. It's got trophies up like on the mantle.
It's untouched.
Yeah, it looks way too small. I mean, we get a good view of this guy's house. It's huge. And he's there
It's
all
a cleaner,
by himself. Yeah.
we think, or at least some distant spouse who doesn't interact with it all.
I assume that anyone we see in the background of his house is like staff or something. Because what I think is like this tragic thing happened. He had a child who interacted with the World's Fair, took it too seriously, and harmed himself or someone else, and now he's lost everything.
I think he killed himself. I think that's why he specifically tells Casey at the end, don't do it.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think as a result of that, like his wife left him, and so now his obsession, the way he copes with that is to just be online and to try and help other people who, he fears that they'll have the same reaction to the World's Fair as his child did. Mm-hmm. Because I just think there's too much just set up in the background. Why is this guy in a tiny room with, a child's bed in it and trophies? It's not an office. So
a lot of glass clowns.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
But I think that also makes sense of like the desktop of the computer that he's at. When we see all of the other notes, it looks like he's saying he has other scripts, other things to say to other people. It's like he is just searching World's Fair videos and making... I mean, the other part of the horror that happens in this movie is when Casey is just watching the autoplay on YouTube and a video comes up with her and
Yeah.
a message for her from JLB. And he's just trying to scare her because, oh, hey, by the way, you're playing a game, but this is way more real than you think.
Right.
And I think that's like, he actually genuinely cares about her. And that's why, like, at the end, like, you could get maybe creepy vibes, pedophilia vibes, or like
I didn't buy that
grooming
at all.
vibes. But I don't think that's really the case, because it's insinuated that he genuinely just cares about a lot of people, not just her. But to
Yeah.
make it a convincing story, you really just have to focus on one person.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that made it feel like that, though, was the sticky notes on his computer. Like, because we don't see anything else, like that he cares about other people. But the first time he reaches out to her, he's very clear, like, this is the game. We are only talking in the game. Like, I never got creepy vibes from him either. The first time I saw him, I thought he was a therapist, honestly, that was like reaching out to people, because you just see him from the side at his computer
Yeah.
looking like this like middle-aged clean man. And you're like, oh. And he's like rubbing his face, and you're like, oh, he's worried about another kid getting swept up in this. So I did think he cared, but then the more it went on, the more confusing it was. So I was unsure the whole time, like, what
I think
he was
that's
really
more,
doing.
yeah, and I think that's more of just a language of film thing, that
Yeah.
everything is reinforced by the images that were shown, the context were shown, his actions in, that you don't necessarily. I didn't actually need the desktop with the other sticky notes or anything on it. I think it gives more context for the scope of his concern. But I think just having him in a child's bedroom, that where the bed is always made and everything's immaculate, you see no child though,
Right.
in this giant house. I think that's all that we really need to know, that the way that you can process images and motivations,
Yeah.
to know that that's why he's doing the things that he's doing.
Right.
Do you guys want to hear a fun fact?
Ah, dang, that's usually my thing,
Oh
but I'm
my God.
excited. I'm usually not on the other end of these. This is wonderful.
I got weirded out hearing that from someone else's voice.
Fun fact. So Jane Schoenbrun, when they were a kid, creepypasta was a thing. They had this whole thing about they had a relationship with this like 30-year-old guy that was reaching out and being super like clingy and everything, and like was super crazy. It might be slightly based on this, like somebody older reaching out to a needy kid, because I definitely didn't get pedophile vibes. Like when she said that at the end and he got all freaked out, it didn't really make sense to me. But the whole idea that an older person is like reaching out to somebody with such necessity, like I'm gonna call you, that doesn't, like at that point it felt like it was crossing the line between, okay, I care about you, I want to like just keep tabs on you, and like I'm obsessed with you, like I'm watching all 10 hours of you sleeping and making videos about it. Like at what point does genuinely caring about somebody cross the line? Because for me, like watching a 10-hour video of someone sleeping, like that doesn't seem like,
It borders on obsession in an
Yeah.
unhealthy way.
yeah.
I think you can have obsession and not be a pedophile. I mean, to me, that indicates like
I don't think they were
some kind of
pedophile.
sexual need. I think, yeah, he's made things uncomfortable and he's crossed the line. But the pedophile line at the end, I was like, well, you haven't really built your character to be that way.
No.
So for him to be described that way at the end, I didn't think made a lot of sense.
But he also did that weird thing where he like did her voice when he was giving the like, this is what happened, and like, oh, I'm so happy. Like
That was
He was-
really weird.
Yeah.
that was the creepiest part to me. I'm like, oh, if you're acting her voice, like this didn't happen,
So
and you made this narrative up, and
Exactly. That's exactly what I think. That story at the end is created because he needs to have closure to know that things did turn out well for her. Because he is so concerned. He is worried about her being swept up in the World's Fair. And so he's created a story that he's going to put out on his YouTube channel or whoever's listening to him. Or maybe he's just saying it to himself. Maybe he just needed to go through some cathartic experience where he's made up this story where things turn out okay between them and things turn out okay for her. But I do think that story at the end is made up. I don't think he ever met with her in New York and that things turn out okay.
Yeah.
okay.
You want another level of theory?
Yes.
In the spirit of creepypastas, I don't think Casey exists.
Oh, that's great. I like that. I like that idea a lot.
I think that, because I mean, so many of those. There's there's a subreddit where people write horror stories, and the only rule on it is everything here is absolutely real. even though it's not, we pretend it is, or something. It's something
Right.
along those lines, and I can't remember what it is, but all of those stories feel so authentic, and I think that's kind of the why when he's making that story up at the end and putting it in her voice, that we get either that he's a strange, weird dude that does care about someone. That's that's a nuanced thing of human behavior, or it's because she's a character within his own mind and he's just acting these out because he doesn't see a difference between them.
Yeah, no, I like that idea a lot. There is a dumber version of this movie where he tells that story and then there's like the camera pans over his shoulder to the computer monitor and he writes like the end at the end of like a Word document and it turns out it was just a story he made up. I think that's a dumber way to do it. I like the ambiguity of this movie, and I like because then it makes it to where like I can come up with a theory and you can come up with that. I like that idea a lot, though. That makes that's another layer, like you said.
Well, and especially because if he puts the end as the last shot, or if we know for sure that it is a made up story, it totally robs the idea of all of the themes that we had built up about why Casey is acting the way she is. Like, she is a real person engaging with the internet in a very lonely state, looking for mother figures, like that woman that was shushing her to sleep, looking for father figures in JLB, looking for friends, other people playing this game, engaging with their videos and hoping that other people watch hers. It would completely sap all of this out because it was just like, oh, it's a good story, huh? But I think that this really leaving it ambiguous makes it feel like everything is real and absolutely something that could have happened in some ways life. And I think that's the thing, is like when it's mundane like this, how far off from reality is this?
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of like not real, were you guys caught off guard by the fact, towards the end, Casey just says like, she says like, I'm just acting, like these are just videos. Like I was never going to do any of this.
No, I was like pleasantly relieved. Not like relieved, but I was like, oh, well. So it made me think about everything else she'd done as meaning something a little bit more. Like her little tarot. So this kind of ties into JLB too, but like her tarot card reading, I was like, oh, she's doing a reading on JLB.
Oh, exactly.
Because she's like, you're anxious and creepy and you don't really have control over me and I'm going to do whatever I want.
I love that. She's like, oh, you think you're in charge? You
Yeah,
can just come
like
in,
you're not.
You can just come in and be in charge. Like, yeah, it's absolutely about JLB.
Yeah, so at the end to have her be like, oh yeah, I was just playing, it's like the confusing part is like how much does she really believe that she was playing like the whole time, and like where's the line between reality and what's going on in the internet? Where is her own personal line between I have power and I'm helpless, because she's obviously helpless in her real life, nobody's connecting with her. So I was like kind of happy because I'm like, oh, she does get it. Like
Right.
she like kids and teenagers are a lot smarter than we think they are. They're not always just going to get sucked in on the internet. Like they do kind of know what they're doing. But they also get sucked in.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I think she was just telling him that so she'd leave him so he'd leave her alone. I think she was going to kill herself, and I think that's also implied by the fact that she goes to the that he I guess we don't know for sure, because he's the one that tells us that she went to a mental health facility for a few months. So I guess we don't know for sure.
She could have been playing and just been like, yeah, I'm done with this game now.
Yeah, or maybe she actually did kill herself and he just decided to write the end of it.
All right, this conversation went a little longer than I was expecting. I think it'd be better if we split this one up into two parts. It feels like we just have a lot more to say about this movie than I think we went into it originally. So with that, we're going to wrap this one up. I just want to thank Calvin for being on as always.
It's been my pleasure.
And Katya, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And please join us for part 2 of We're All Going to the World's Fair. And with that, you can find our podcast on any platform like Apple Music or Spotify. We also upload all these to YouTube. So go ahead and leave a comment. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And if you have any suggestions for movies we can do in the future, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And with that, thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.